At my brother's gala, my dad called me a disgrace. My sister-in-law spilled wine on me and they laughed, until a billionaire walked in. The smell of polished metal, freshly treated leather, and that almost imperceptible touch of high-octane gasoline has always been my favorite perfume. Here, in the bowels of Imperio Motor, my sanctuary, every day is a symphony of tools that sing, engines that roar to life, and the satisfied gleam in my boy's eyes when a jewel on wheels is ready. Today, for example, we were putting the finishing touches on a 1968 Lamborghini, a fiery orange that seemed to contain the sun. Don Magnus, a Swedish collector who is more of a good friend than a client, nodded his head, his blue eyes shining behind his designer glasses. Santiago, son, his deep voice, with that lilting accent, resonated in the workshop. Every time I think you have reached perfection, you surpass yourself. This restoration is poetry. I smiled at him, a genuine smile, one of those born from pride in a job well done. My boys, a team of artisans who are more family than employees, shared that same look. But just as the Miura was leaving the workshop on a special tow truck heading to the airport, my personal paradise was interrupted. My cell phone vibrated on the workbench covered with blueprints and specialized tools. It was a message in the family chat, the one I almost always ignore. Reminder, Ricardo's big night. Alcazar Hall, Hotel Presidente Intercontinental. 8 p.m. strict dress code. Below, a photo of my brother Ricardo smiling with that self-satisfaction that characterizes him so much, next to his wife Leticia, whose smile seemed more like a catalog grimace. Not a Santiago, how are you? Nora, would you like to come? Only the cold, implicit order that one should already know their place, or rather, what is not their place. A sigh escaped me, heavy, laden with years. Here, at Imperio Motor, I am the Midas King of classic cars, the man who whispers to engines and restores them to glory. My workshops in Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara are the mecca for the world's most demanding collectors. Money, thank God, and a superhuman effort stopped being a concern a long time ago. But that scar, the one from the rejection of my own blood, that still hurts with a dull ache. My father, Antonio Herrera, a man forged in tradition and the fear of what others will say, for whom public image is everything. My mother, Isabel, a sweet soul but trapped in submission to her husband and blind adoration for her firstborn, Ricardo, the golden boy, the financial genius. And then there is Leticia, my sister-in-law, a textbook social climber whose only talent is spending Ricardo's money and looking down on anyone who does not fit her narrow mold of good people. And how could I forget Uncle Javier, my mother's brother, the official family gossip, always ready to add fuel to the fire with his poisonous comments. A memory as sharp as the polished chrome of a Cadillac. I was in my early 20s. I had just announced my decision to leave my promising engineering position at an oil company to open a mechanic shop. My father's face contorted, his veins bulging in his neck. "You would be better off dead than bringing us this dishonor," he yelled, his words like lashes. An engineer, my son, an engineer with a future, turned into a mere grease monkey, a fifth-rate mechanic. "You are the shame of this family." My mother cried silently. Ricardo smiled with superiority. I shook my head, trying to push away those ghosts. The roar of a V12 engine being tested on the dynamometer brought me back to the present. I had work to do, an empire to run, but the shadow of Ricardo's big night already loomed over me, a dark cloud in my usually clear sky. Another family event to attend out of obligation, another parade of hypocrisies, another opportunity for them to remind me that, to them, I was still the same failure as always, no matter how many millions Imperio Motor invoiced. I was 25 years old, and the world, or at least the world my family had designed for me, seemed to be at my feet. Chemical engineer with honors, working for Petrocorp International, one of those gigantic oil companies where salaries were obscene and promotion opportunities, for someone with my profile, seemed limitless. I remember the Sunday family dinners, my father, Antonio, puffing up like a peacock every time he mentioned my position, my brilliant future. Ricardo, my older brother, was already beginning to climb the ladder in the world of finance, and, between the two of us, we were the pride of the Herrera household, living proof that education and good connections were the key to success. Leticia, Then Ricardo's girlfriend already looked at me with that cold calculation of someone evaluating an asset's worth. But beneath the facade of the promising young engineer, another flame burned. My nights and weekends were not spent rubbing shoulders with the business elite, but getting my hands dirty in a small hovel I had rented on the rooftop of an old tenement building. There, surrounded by second-hand tools and the pungent aroma of burnt oil, I dedicated myself to my true passion, bringing old engines back to life, unraveling the mysteries of precision mechanics. That dark, chaotic corner was my true sanctuary, my escape from the rigidity and, often, the hypocrisy of the corporate world. The breaking point came during a board meeting. A new drilling project in a protected mangrove area was being discussed. The environmental impact reports were a sham, doctored to obtain permits. There was talk of acceptable collateral damage, of resource optimization, that were nothing more than euphemisms to cover up ecological devastation in exchange for stratospheric profits. I could not sleep that night. The stench of corruption, of unscrupulousness, suffocated me. The next day, I submitted my resignation. I could not be a part of it. I needed to look myself in the mirror every morning without feeling nauseous. Announcing my decision at home was like detonating a bomb. I explained to my father my ethical reasons, my need to do something that truly fulfilled me, something with my own hands, to open a highly specialized mechanic shop. His face went from bewilderment to absolute fury. "Are you crazy? Have you completely lost your mind?" he roared, slamming his fist on the table. "To trade a director's salary, a secure future, for the misery and grease of a rinky-dink workshop. You are no son of mine. I refuse to have a son who chooses to be a nobody, a nobody." Ricardo let out a mocking laugh. "You were always a stupid idealist, little brother. Now you will sink in your own filth, but do not expect us to throw you a lifeline." Letitia, with a grimace of disgust, pronounced, "What a monumental embarrassment. I will have to say my brother-in-law went as a missionary to Africa or something, so I do not have to face the shame of admitting he is a mechanic." My mother, Isabel, cried inconsolably, her heart torn between her love for me and her loyalty to her husband and older son. She did not say a word in my defense. Uncle Javier, who happened to be visiting, was already rubbing his hands, imagining the juicy gossip he would spread throughout the entire extended family. With a broken heart but a strange sense of liberation, I packed my few belongings. I would take nothing from that house that I had not earned with my own effort. Before crossing the threshold, I turned and looked my father in the eyes. "I do not need your approval, father," I said with a calmness I did not feel. "I need a clear conscience. And someday I will show you that this path, my path, is worth more than all the gold you so admire." I left there knowing I was alone, but strangely at peace. The price of my freedom was high, but I was willing to pay it. The first few months were brutal. With my meager savings and a small loan I managed to get from a dubious finance company, I rented a tiny place, almost a shack, in an industrial area on the east side of the city, one of those places where the asphalt always seems to sweat oil and the air smells of metal and broken dreams. I slept on a folding cot in a corner, among dilapidated engines and rusty tools. It was then that Providence, or perhaps fate, put Don Anselmo in my path, an old master mechanic of the kind that no longer exists, with hands like steel claws and a heart of gold beneath a curmudgeonly facade. His workshop, El Engrain de Oro, the Golden Gear, was a legend in the neighborhood, a humble place but one where wisdom and honesty were breathed. I came to him looking for a specific part one could not find anywhere. He saw me, young, eager, but clearly disoriented. After making me sweat bullets with technical questions that seemed like a professional exam, he let out a chuckle and said, "You have a good hand, boy, and you do not wrinkle your nose at grease, but you lack cunning. If you want, you can come help me. I will not pay you much, just enough for your beans, but you will learn what they do not teach in any university." I accepted without hesitation. Don Anselmo became my mentor, my substitute father figure. He taught me the deepest secrets of the trade, those that are passed down from master to apprentice, not with manuals, but with example and precise words. "An engine has a soul, Santiago," he would tell me as we adjusted a carburetor. "You have to know how to listen to it, respect it. There are no luxuries here, boy. Only honest work and the satisfaction of seeing an engine roar back to life, like a lion. While I was working my fingers to the bone from sunrise to sunset, Uncle Javier, on one of his social research expeditions, as he called them, found me. I was under a dilapidated Ford Fairlane, covered in grease from head to toe, when I heard his shrill voice. Santiago. What a surprise. So this is what you do now. How quaint. He took a couple of photos with his cell phone, surely to document my new life, and ran to spread the news, duly embellished with lurid details about my decline. The family, of course, felt a mixture of "I told you so" and second-hand embarrassment multiplied by 1,000. My mother's calls became more sporadic, filled with sighs and phrases like, "Oh, my son, when are you going to settle down?" Ricardo, for his part, was not content with passive contempt. He began to move in the shadows. A couple of important suppliers with whom I had begun to establish contacts suddenly closed their doors to me, citing internal policies. I later learned, from a discreet contact, that Ricardo had personally called to warn them about my lack of seriousness and my history of failures. Even a couple of my first clients, small workshops that subcontracted precision work to me, backed out after receiving friendly advice from someone very well connected in the financial world. Every obstacle was a stab, but also a spur. If they wanted war, they would have it. I looked for alternatives. I worked twice as hard. I demonstrated my professionalism and my word with facts. It was during that time of fierce struggle that I met Sophia. She was then a final-year student of industrial design and marketing at Ibero, brilliant, with an overwhelming energy and a vision that transcended the conventional. She came to my small workshop following the trail of a piece she had designed for a university project and that only a madman like me would dare to manufacture. She saw beyond the grease and the disorder. She saw the potential, the passion. "You have gold in your hands, Santiago," she told me with a conviction that disarmed me. "But you need the world to see it. Let me help you with your image, with your brand. I will not charge you anything. Take it as an investment in a future genius." Thus, between engines and blueprints, an alliance was born that would change my life forever. Don Anselmo, with his popular wisdom, pronounced, "That girl has a star, Santiago, and you need someone to help you polish yours." Sophia was a whirlwind of fresh ideas and contagious energy. She designed an elegant and powerful logo for Imperio Motor, combining the silhouette of a gear with that of a golden eagle. She created social media profiles where, instead of showing gaudily tuned cars, she published artistic photos of the restoration process, highlighting the craftsmanship, the precision, the history behind each vehicle. Her texts were little poems to engineering and design. Don Anselmo, initially skeptical of so much modernity, ended up admitting with a sly smile, "This kid knows more about selling iron than we do in a lifetime." Little by little, Imperio Motors' reputation began to grow, first locally, then attracting the attention of some serious collectors who were looking for more than just a simple workshop. It was then that the incident with my father's Mercedes happened. It was a 1969 280 SL Pagoda, his greatest pride, although he barely took it out of the garage. Just a week before the annual Avendaro Classic Car Rally, which Dad Antonio attended religiously more to show off than out of genuine passion, the Mercedes engine gave out. A complex breakdown, one of those that required deep knowledge and hard-to-find parts. No workshop he considered decent dared to touch it with so little time or asked for an astronomical sum. My mother, in a rare burst of initiative and perhaps seeing an opportunity to smooth things over, convinced him to call me. "Antonio, please," I heard her say over the phone, as Ricardo, very conveniently, was too busy to get involved. "Santiago is an engineer and, although he now dedicates himself to that, he has always been a genius with machines. Give him a chance." Reluctantly, my father agreed. Ricardo called me, with his usual tone of superiority. "Hey, Santiago, Dad says if you can take a look at his jalopy. It broke down, and well, you know how he is. See if you can do something, right? But quickly, he is in a hurry." I felt the old wound throb, but I also saw an opportunity. Not for reconciliation, because I knew that was impossible, but to show them once again what I was capable of. I took the Mercedes to my workshop, which by then was a little larger and better equipped thanks to a couple of successful projects. It was 3 days and 3 nights with hardly any sleep. I had to handcraft a couple of parts, resort to almost forgotten contacts to get others. Sophia brought me coffee and encouraged me, while Don Anselmo supervised with his critical eye. Finally, the pagoda's engine roared back to life, more tuned and powerful than ever. When my father came to pick it up, accompanied by Ricardo, he barely looked at me. He walked around the car, opened the hood, listened to the engine. It seems to work, was all he said. I expected no less. That is what you studied engineering for, right? Anyway, how much do I owe you? Nothing, father, I replied. Consider it a family favor. Ricardo smiled smugly. Weeks later, Uncle Javier, on one of his casual visits to my workshop, surely sent as a spy, dropped the venom with his usual glee. Oh, nephew, it is good you fixed your dad's car. He was bragging at the golf club that his son, the renegade engineer, although good for nothing in serious business, at least saved him a good bit of money on mechanics. He said it was the least you could do, after all the embarrassments you have caused him. And you should have seen Letitia. She said at a dinner that they had to take the car to a very expensive detailer because it stank of a cheap workshop, and that it was a good thing they did not pay you a penny because you did not even deserve it. That night, as I looked at the reflection of a Santiago covered in grease and exhaustion in a window pane, I swore it would be the last time. The last time I would allow their contempt to reach me in that way. The last time I would wait for a crumb of recognition from those who only knew how to trample. Imperio Motor would be my fortress and my success, the only answer I would give them. Driven by that last and painful affront, and with Sophia as my general in the battlefield of marketing and business strategy, Imperio Motor underwent a radical transformation. We focused exclusively on the restoration of high-end classic cars and the customization of luxury vehicles for a clientele that sought not only exclusivity, but also art and mechanical perfection. We secured angel investors, some of them initial clients who were amazed by my work and Sophia's vision, and we moved to state-of-the-art facilities in the Santa Fe area, a complex that looked more like a NASA laboratory than a mechanic shop. We hired the best artisans, many of them young talents whom I personally trained, instilling in them Don Anselmo's philosophy, respect for the machine and obsession with detail. The name Imperio Motor began to resonate in the most exclusive circles of world motorsport. We won awards at elegance competitions in Pebble Beach and Villa d'Este. Magazines like Rob Report and GQ dedicated laudatory reports to us. Arab sheiks sent their entire collections in cargo planes for us to restore. Hollywood stars and Silicon Valley tycoons were put on a waiting list for a Santiago Herrera customization. The company grew exponentially. We opened branches in Monterrey, focused on ultra-luxury armored vehicles, and in Guadalajara, to serve the growing market of collectors in the region. I became a rich man, very rich, but my lifestyle remained relatively simple. The real luxury for me was the freedom to create, to innovate, to see a piece of automotive history come back to life in my hands. I kept a low profile, especially with my family. They only knew, through Uncle Javier's inevitable gossip, that Santiaguito seems to be doing not so bad with his little cars. Despite everything, every year, like a self-imposed ritual, I sent my parents a considerable check, about $25,000. Perhaps it was a way of showing them that, in my own way, I could also be successful, or perhaps, deep in my heart, I still harbored a ridiculous hope that one day they would see beyond their prejudices. The response was always the same. A formal email from my mother, probably drafted by Ricardo, confirming the deposit. Dear Santiago, we have received the transfer. We appreciate your consideration. Sincerely, Isabel Herrera. If I ever called, my father would answer coldly. Oh, is that you? Yes, the money arrived. I am busy now. We will talk later. That later never came. It was around that time that my Aunt Elena, my father's younger sister and the only one in the family with a hint of artistic sensibility and genuine affection for me, tried to reach out. She lived in Paris, was an art curator, and had always lamented my father's narrow-mindedness. On one of her visits to Mexico, she called me. Dear nephew, I know things with Antonio and Ricardo are complicated, but your mother suffers in silence. Why do you not come to a family meal, something intimate, just us? Maybe it will help, I do not know, for them to see the man you have become. With many doubts, I accepted. Aunt Elena was the only one who, from a distance, had ever sent me a word of encouragement. The meal was a disaster. Ricardo did not stop bragging about his latest promotion at the investment bank, a position with a bombastic name and a stratospheric salary. Dad Antonio looked at him with devotion and then shot me sidelong glances as if to say, "See, this is real success, not your little game with old cars." Letitia, with her viper smile, commented on how old-fashioned the watch I was wearing looked, an Omega Speedmaster that had belonged to my grandfather and had enormous sentimental value for me. I could not bear it. Halfway through dessert, I excused myself and left. Later, Annalena sent me a message. "I am so sorry, Santiago. I had hopes, but I see there are walls impossible to tear down. Some people simply will never learn to see beyond their noses. Follow your path. Nephew, you are making history." My relationship with Mr. Armando Villarreal, the industrial magnate, had strengthened. He was no longer just another client. He had become a kind of mentor and friend. He knew bits and pieces of my family history. I think Aunt Elena, with whom he maintained an old friendship through the art world, had told him something that seemed to increase his respect for me. People who cling to outdated prejudices, Santiago, he told me once as we admired a Hispano-Suiza we had restored, miss the opportunity to meet extraordinary people. You keep shining. Your own light is what matters. His words were a balm. The news fell like a bombshell in the social microcosm of Mexico City. Ricardo Herrera, my older brother, had been awarded Financier of the Year by the National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, one of those awards that inflate egos and open doors in the most exclusive circles of power and money. To celebrate such a feat, my family decided to throw a lavish party, a gala dinner in the Hall of Mirrors at Chapultepec Castle. One could not aspire to a more iconic, more ostentatious, more representative place of the elite to which they so longed to fully belong. I found out, as almost always, in the worst possible way, through a post by Letitia on Instagram, a photo of her and Ricardo posing with the official invitation, accompanied by a text full of pretentious hashtags. Hashtag Financier of the Year, hashtag Herrera Pride, hashtag Chapultepec Gala, hashtag The Life We Deserve. Not a mention of me, of course. Days later, I received a call from my mother. Her voice sounded tense, almost rehearsed. "Santiago, my son, your father and I, well, we expect you to attend your brother's dinner. It is a very important event for him, for the family. It would be appropriate for you to be present." The word appropriate tasted like bile to me. There was not a hint of enthusiasm in her voice, only the fulfillment of an unpleasant duty. I hung up the phone with a mixture of anger and weariness. My first impulse was to tell them all to go to hell, to invent an urgent business trip, a sudden illness. Why subject myself once again to their circus of hypocrisy and disdain? I called Sophia. I needed to vent. She listened to me with that infinite patience that characterized her. "I understand your anger, Santiago," she said softly. "But think of it another way. Go, but do not go as the prodigal son seeking approval. Go as Santiago Herrera, the founder and CEO of Imperial Motor. Impeccable, sure of yourself, owner of your space. Let them see you in your best light, not to impress them, but to close that chapter internally, to prove to yourself that their opinions no longer define you." Then I called Don Anselmo. His reaction was more visceral. "Tell them to go fry asparagus, boy," he exclaimed in his hoarse voice. But on second thought, he added after a pause, "Maybe that Sophia kid is right. Those clowns need a lesson in humility, even if it is indirect. Go and let them squirm a little, seeing that you could not have reached higher without their help." The call that finally tipped the scales was from my Aunt Elena from Paris. "Nephew of my heart," she said in her warm voice, "I know what you are thinking, but listen to me for once. Go to that dinner, and, please, take out of the closet that Italian suit that Prince Althani gave you, and wear that wonderful watch I know you have stored away, the one your chic friend gave you. Sometimes, Santiago, for certain people to understand, you have to speak to them in their own language, the language of appearances they so venerate. Not for them, but for you to feel invulnerable." Her words resonated with me. They were right. This time I would not go like a lamb to the slaughter. I would go like a lion. I decided to go, not for them, but for myself and, perhaps, just perhaps, to send them a silent message, one they could not ignore. I carefully chose my attire. A custom-made chiton suit in a deep midnight blue, a white Egyptian linen shirt, and the Patek Philippe Nautilus that a sheik from Abu Dhabi had given me as a thank you for restoring his collection of vintage Ferraris. That night, I decided I would drive one of my own creations to the castle entrance, a 1961 Jaguar E-Type, perfectly restored and modified with a Tesla electric motor, a masterpiece of classic engineering and modern technology, my most recent masterpiece. Silent, elegant, lethal, as I intended to be that night. The arrival at Chapultepec Castle was as I had anticipated, spectacular. The electric Jaguar E-Type glided silently along the cobblestone driveway, its deep blood-red bodywork gleaming under the lights illuminating the historic facade. The flashes of the society photographers stationed at the entrance to capture the cream of Mexican society went off when they saw me get out. I handed the keys to the valet, a young man who looked at me with undisguised admiration, and I headed towards the entrance of the Hall of Mirrors with my head held high. My family was already there, presiding over one of the main tables. The entrance of Santiago Herrera, the owner of Imperio Motor, did not go unnoticed by many of the other guests, businessmen, politicians, and entertainment figures who knew my work or my reputation. I saw several heads turn, some discreet greetings, looks of recognition. But the reception from my own family was the same, as always, a bucket of ice water. My father gave me a fleeting glance, full of reproach. Was all that show with that car necessary, Santiago? He hissed when I approached to greet them. Always trying to get attention in the wrong way. You could have arrived in a taxi, like a normal person. Ricardo, with a smile that did not reach his eyes, patted me on the back, which felt more like a shove. Little brother, good thing you could rent something decent so you would not stand out so much tonight. I thought you would come in your work overalls. Letitia scanned me from head to toe, her gaze lingering on my watch with a mixture of envy and disdain. Well, Sandy, how exotic. Is it one of those Russian watches they sell downtown? I was assigned, as expected, the worst table in the room, almost next to the kitchen entrance, sharing it with some distant relatives on my mother's side whom I barely knew and who spent their time whispering among themselves, casting curious glances at me as if I were a rare specimen. Uncle Javier, of course, did not miss the opportunity to do his thing. With his phone in hand, he started a live broadcast for his few but loyal followers on some third-rate social network. I saw him discreetly focus on me while whispering to the camera. And here we have, dear followers, my nephew, the entrepreneur. A little out of his element, the boy, do you not think? But well, family is family. I decided to ignore him, concentrating on maintaining an expression of serene indifference. The height of humiliation came courtesy of Letitia. As she was heading to the restroom, she passed by my table and, with a feigned clumsiness that was insulting, tripped and spilled the contents of her glass of red wine directly onto my white shirt. Oh, how clumsy I am, for God's sake, she exclaimed with a giggle that fooled no one. What a shame, Sandy. Although, well, with that shirt you probably bought on sale, you surely have many like it at home, do you not? The purple stain spread across my chest like an open wound. Ricardo's speech was the icing on the cake. After the obligatory thanks, he allowed himself a philosophical reflection. In this life, friends, there are those who choose the path of intellectual effort, strategy, and corporate success, he said, glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. And there are others who, unfortunately, get lost in youthful fantasies, in chimeras that only bring as a reward grease under their fingernails and the bitter disappointment of failure. The hint was so direct that several guests cleared their throats uncomfortably. Just before the main course was served, and anticipating Mr. Villarreal's imminent arrival, my father approached my table. His face was a mask of severity. Definitely, Santiago, he said in a low voice, but with a harshness that cut the air. You are and always will be the black sheep of this family. No matter how much you try to pretend with expensive suits and flashy cars, deep down you are still the same failed mechanic as always. You make me pity you and deeply ashamed. I looked at him intently. For the first time that night, I felt the ice I had built around my heart begin to melt, not out of weakness, but out of an icy fury rising from my gut. Pity, father, I replied in an equally low voice but laden with a meaning I hoped he would understand, is what I feel for you. For your blindness, for your inability to see beyond your own prejudices. I got up from the table. I could not bear another minute in that toxic environment. My intention was to leave, to disappear from their lives forever. But fate, that night, had other plans. I was a few meters from the exit of the Hall of Mirrors, my decision to leave irrevocable, when the main door swung open and a major domo announced in a powerful voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of receiving our distinguished guest of honor, Mr. Don Armando Villarreal." A murmur of expectation ran through the room. All eyes turned towards the entrance. Ricardo, who was in the middle of a peroration with a group of fawning businessmen, straightened up like a spring and ran towards the entrance, his face lit up by a servile smile. "Don Armando, what an honor. Welcome, welcome. We were eagerly awaiting you." Letitia hurried to his side, offering her best hostess smile. Don Armando Villarreal, a man in his 60s, tall, with impeccably styled silver hair and a presence that radiated power and bonhomie in equal measure, greeted Ricardo and his wife with a nod. His eyes, however, quickly scanned the room, as if looking for someone. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on me, who remained motionless near the exit, the wine stain still visible on my shirt. A huge, genuine, and warm smile lit up his face. Completely ignoring Ricardo and the entourage that had formed around him, Don Armando walked with a determined stride directly towards me. "Santiago, son," he exclaimed in a voice that resonated in the sudden silence of the room. "What a pleasant and monumental surprise to find you here. I was wondering if you would deign to appear at such a formal event." He reached me and gave me a strong hug, the kind old friend's gift. "But what happened to your shirt, boy? An accident with an overly enthusiastic Malbec?" Then, without letting go of my shoulder, he turned to the rest of the guests, who were watching us with a mixture of astonishment and confusion. His voice took on a more formal, but no less warm, tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting in this way, but I cannot pass up the opportunity to greet, as he deserves, a true titan of Mexican industry, an artist of engineering, a creative genius who is putting our country's name at the highest level worldwide. This man you see here," and he squeezed my shoulder tighter, "Santiago Herrera, is the soul, the heart, and the brain behind the legendary Imperio motor. His creations, his restorations, are coveted by collectors from Tokyo to Dubai, from London to Los Angeles. He is a magician." He paused dramatically and then addressed Ricardo directly, whose face had gone through a whole range of colors, from the red of surprise to the pale white of absolute shock. "Ricardo," Don Armando said with a smile that had an edge of irony, "you must be so proud to have a brother with such talent, with this business vision. A true captain of industry, Santiago, not like us who are just simple financiers playing with numbers." Then, turning his attention back to my stained shirt, he added with a penetrating gaze that swept over my family's table, "And whoever was responsible for this little mishap on my friend Santiago's impeccable attire, I hope they are aware that they have just offended the owner of a company that, allow me to say with full knowledge, is probably worth more than the entire branch that our talented friend Ricardo here present manages. And that, gentlemen, is saying a lot." The silence that followed was so dense, so heavy, that it could have been cut with a butter knife. I saw my father clutch his chest, as if he were short of breath. Letitia seemed to have swallowed her own tongue, her mouth open in a perfect O of stupor. Uncle Javier, who had been recording everything with his cell phone, dropped it on the floor with a dull thud. My mother covered her face with her hands, and I could see her shoulders shaking, although I could not tell if it was from crying or pure shock. Ricardo's jaw seemed to have become completely unhinged. Only the distant clinking of cutlery from some diners oblivious to the drama unfolding before their eyes, and the furious beating of my own heart could be heard, which for the first time in a long time was not from pain or anger, but from a strange, icy, and triumphant calm. The lightning bolt of truth had struck, and its effects were just beginning to be felt. The rest of the evening was an absurdist play. Don Armando, with astonishing naturalness, took me by the arm and led me to the main table, right next to him, displacing a couple of important businessmen who had to find seats elsewhere. The conversation with him was pleasant, full of anecdotes about cars, art, and business, but I was fully aware of the furtive glances and whispers coming from the table where my family was trying to recover from the cataclysm. Ricardo barely touched his food, Letitia kept smiling nervously at everyone, and my father maintained a cadaverous rigidity. The next morning, the siege began. The first to call was Ricardo. His voice, usually full of arrogance, now sounded mellifluous, almost cloying. "Dearest brother, what a night last night. What a surprise you had in store for us. Hey, I was thinking, we need to talk business, seriously. With my contacts in the financial world, and you, well, your talent with metal, we could conquer the world. Imagine, Imperio Motor Villarreal Herrera Financial Automotive Group. I will get you high-caliber investors. You take care of the technical part, the production. We could open branches in Europe, in Asia. What do you say? A 50-50 split? And of course, as the main partner, I will need a couple of your best models for mobility and representation, to project the right image." He tried to let out a folksy laugh that sounded completely false. Then my mother called. Her voice, broken by a sob that seemed as artificial as the pearls she used to wear. "My holy son, what great emotion. I always knew, deep in my heart, that you had a star guiding you. Forgive your father, Sandy. You know how he is, a man from another era, a little rustic in his ways. But he is very proud of you, very proud. We all are." Letitia did not call. She sent an avalanche of WhatsApp messages full of heart emojis and smiling faces. "And Santi, dearest brother-in-law, what an impact last night. You are a genius. We have to go shopping urgently. I need your advice for my dream car, and I would really love to visit your workshops. I have always been a secret classic car enthusiast, believe it or not. Kisses." The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost touch it. The one who did dare to show up unannounced at the Imperio Motor facilities was my father. It was the first time he had set foot in my workplace. He toured the main hangars, where my boys were working on true works of art on wheels, with an expression that tried to be one of interested amazement but could not hide his bewilderment. "Santiago, son," he began with feigned solemnity. "I have been reflecting deeply. Perhaps I was a little harsh with you in the past. It is evident that you have a certain talent for this." He paused, as if waiting for my gratitude. "It is time for you to assume your place in the family and also in our family businesses. Your success, after all, is also our success. I have been thinking that you might consider buying a significant package of shares in Herrera Construction. It needs an injection of fresh capital to expand. And about last night's dinner, well, it was a small misunderstanding. Things happen. Don Armando Villarreal is a very valuable contact. You should cultivate him carefully, for everyone's benefit, of course." I listened to each of them with an icy courtesy, a mask of impassivity I had perfected over the years. I did not interrupt them. I let them expound, weave their webs of falsehood and greed. I asked Ricardo with feigned curiosity, "That merger sounds interesting, brother, but what exactly would be my shareholding and my decision-making power, considering that Imperio Motor already invoices, say, about 10 or 15 times more than the bank branch you manage?" His face changed slightly. To Letitia, I replied with a curt message. "Thank you for your kind words, sister-in-law. I am afraid my schedule is completely full in the coming months." To my mother, I said, "I appreciate your call, mother. We will talk another time." And to my father, after his tirade, I simply looked at him and said, "I understand your proposal, father. Allow me to consider it." I wanted to see how far they were capable of going. I wanted them to unmask themselves completely, to reveal the depth of their opportunism. And they did not disappoint me. The feast of vultures disguised as repentant sheep was just beginning, but I was already preparing the final banquet, and it would not exactly be to my liking. A couple of days later, I summoned them all to an extraordinary meeting in the main conference room of Imperio Motor, a large, minimalist space, presided over by an enormous polished mahogany table and with windows offering a panoramic view of the prototype design and assembly area. Dad Antonio, Mom Isabel, Ricardo, and Letitia arrived punctually, dressed in their finest, as if attending the signing of an international treaty that would benefit them enormously. Uncle Javier tried to sneak in behind them, but my head of security, an ex-military man with a grim face to whom I had given precise instructions, denied him access with a courtesy that brooked no argument. "I am sorry, sir. This is a private meeting." I could see the frustration on my uncle's face, deprived of his informative bait. Beside me, at the head of the table, sat Don Anselmo, in his usual impeccably clean overalls, and Sophia, elegant and serene. They were my witnesses, my true family. When everyone was seated, I began to speak, my voice calm, but with a steely edge. Thank you for coming. I have listened carefully to your interesting proposals and reflections of the last few days. I paused, scanning their expectant faces with a cold gaze. And I must say, you have surprised me. Not because of your sudden interest in my well-being or that of Imperial Motor, but because of the astonishing capacity you have for self-deception and hypocrisy. The smiles froze on their faces. Before discussing any business, I continued, I would like to make a brief review. For more than 15 years, I was, to you, the grease monkey, the failure, the disgrace of the family. Every achievement of mine was minimized, every effort ridiculed. However, and here my voice acquired a barely veiled sarcastic tone, you accepted without the slightest hesitation the $25,000 annually that this fifth-rate mechanic sent you punctually. Money that, I suppose, did not smell of grease or failure when it reached your bank accounts, did it? Ricardo tried to interrupt, but I silenced him with a gesture. Now, allow me to show you something. I turned on the projector, and on the huge screen appeared the video of the live broadcast Uncle Javier had recorded during the dinner at Chapultepec Castle. Ricardo's derogatory comments about my supposed mediocrity, Letitia's mockery of my stained shirt, even my father's voice calling me a black sheep and a disgrace, were clearly audible. The quality was not optimal, but the message was devastating. Then I projected scanned copies of old emails from over a decade ago, where Ricardo, using a pseudonym, tried to defame my early work with suppliers and potential clients. Irrefutable proof of his sabotage. Don Armando Villarreal, I said as the images continued to project, is a man who, in addition to his immense fortune, values loyalty, integrity, and hard work above all else. He is a man who despises falsehood and betrayal. I am absolutely sure that he would find this whole family dynamic extremely revealing. Perhaps he would even reconsider some of his business dealings with certain financiers of the year who do not hesitate to stab their own blood in the back. The silence in the room was sepulchral. Dad Antonio was livid. Mom Isabel was crying, now with genuine desperation. Ricardo stared at the screen with wide eyes, and Letitia seemed to have shrunk in her seat. I do not need your belated approval, I declared, my voice now charged with an emotion suppressed for too long. I do not need your false repentance or your self-serving proposals. Imperio Motor was built on my sweat, my tears, my sleepless nights, and above all, with the unconditional support of people who believed in me when you turned your backs on me and trampled me. I looked gratefully at Don Anselmo and Sophia, who returned a look of deep affection and pride. They, my employees, my true friends, they are my family. You are just distant relatives, united to me by a blood tie that I decide to sever today. I stood up. From this moment on, any bond between us is formally dissolved. Financial aid, of course, ceases immediately. No more calls, no more visits, no more expectations. I wish you luck in your lives. You will need it. The meeting is over. You may leave. They rose in silence, defeated, humiliated. They did not even dare to look me in the eye. They left the boardroom one by one, like shadows. Weeks later, for my mother's birthday, a messenger delivered a package to her house. Inside, in a velvet case, was the Patek Philippe Nautilus I had worn at the gala. I attached a handwritten note. Mother, this watch represents the time that you, as a family, lost the opportunity to value a son for who he truly was. And it also symbolizes the time that I am no longer willing to waste waiting for a love and respect that will never come from you. May this luxury piece, which you seem to appreciate so much, remind you of the true value of things that money cannot buy. It is my last gift. With the respect I once had for you, Santiago. Since then, I live in peace. A bitter peace at times, yes, but authentic. Imperio Motor continues to grow, expanding throughout the world. With Don Anselmo, we created a foundation to support young mechanics with talent but without resources, so that no one has to go through the humiliations I suffered. Sophia is my partner, my confidant, my life companion. Together we are building a bright future. Uncle Javier, true to his nature, tried a smear campaign against me on some minor social networks. accusing me of being an ungrateful son who abandoned his family. He was crushed almost immediately by an avalanche of testimonies from international clients, public figures, and even by a blunt tweet from Don Armando Villarreal, who published a photo of himself with me on his private jet with the caption, "With my great friend and partner, the visionary Santiago Herrera." Reminder: talent, integrity, and loyalty always triumph over mediocrity and envy. That was the final nail in the coffin of his defamation attempt. And now I turn to you, those who have listened to my story to the end. Did I do the right thing by cutting ties with my past, with my own blood? Are there offenses that time or success cannot, or should not, heal? What would you have done in my place to protect your peace, your dignity, your own heart? I would very much like to know your stories, your thoughts, because at the end of the day, beyond engines and millions, what truly defines us are the decisions we make when we face the crossroads between what is expected of us and who we really are.